I'm Jason UFC, and today we have a story about Daniel Cormier provides possible reason for the UFC Heavyweight Championship John Jones versus Stipe Miocic fight announcement being delayed. I don't know what's going on here, right? We still haven't had the fight even announced. Daniel Cormier has a possible explanation for the delayed heavyweight title fight between John Jones and Stipe Miocic. John Jones won the vacant heavyweight championship over Cyril Gane in his return after 3 years at UFC 285. It was John Jones' first fight in 3 years since vacating the light heavyweight title and rebuilding towards a full-time debut at heavyweight. Minutes after the heavyweight strap was wrapped around John Jones' waist, talks of a GOAT versus GOAT super fight between John Jones and Stipe Miocic surfaced. Stipe Miocic was sitting cage side to watch John Jones defeat Cyril Gane in the first round. The Jones versus Stipe Miocic fight was originally okay. We're gonna have to talk about that one because the UFC's been going crazy. The Stipe Miocic fight was allegedly expected, right? Not originally, allegedly expected to headline UFC 280, 290 to cap off the UFC International Fight Week, but Alexander Volkanovski versus Yair Rodriguez will be the main event for the card instead of the heavyweight scrap. Some have wondered why John Jones versus Stipe Miocic hasn't even been booked yet, right? And Cormier knows what might be going on behind the scenes. Okay, hold on. Daniel Cormier says Stipe Miocic might be delaying the fight due to contact. Okay, let me see. During a recent segment on his YouTube channel, go and subscribe to Daniel Cormier's YouTube channel. He's doing great work, of course. Daniel Cormier weighed in on the UFC Heavyweight Championship fight between John Jones and Stipe Miocic fight announcement still being delayed. UFC, yes, that's what he's mean when he says they. UFC wanted John Jones versus Stipe Miocic. Jones versus Stipe Miocic was on target and was supposed to happen, Cormier said, but obviously that's not happening now. Every time a big fight is about to happen, the issue about that arises is usually financial issues. Okay, you're talking about financial issue. Finances, same thing. You're talking about the two greatest of all time, and I'm certain it came down to finances. Jones obviously just got a new contract, so you'd imagine Jones is pretty happy. So that would have to leave me to believe that the issue is on Miocic's side. I just hate that Stipe keeps losing so much time because by the time he walks into the octagon potentially at UFC Madison Square Garden now, he'll be 41 years old. Wow. Is there anything else we have to go into the story? Okay, let me see. If Daniel Cormier is correct, UFC President Dana White and Miocic might be having a battle behind the scenes. While the Jones versus Miocic fight will likely be the next heavyweight title fight, it remains unclear as to when it will happen. Man, this is okay. So the one thing I wanted to go back to was the John Jones versus Miocic fight was originally expected to headline UFC 290, right? So I'm an MMA casual, so I don't follow everything in the world that happens in all things UFC, but from what I understood, the UFC would usually not, and I can't stress this enough, they would usually not make fights or announce fights after their pay-per-view, right? After John Jones fought Cyril Gane, defeated Cyril Gane for some unknown reason, during the post-fight press conference, the UFC announced, John Jones versus Stipe Miocic is next, and that fight's gonna happen in July, International Fight Week. Yep, that's going to happen. So the media didn't have to ask. Dana White usually tells the media, hey, the fight just happened. We're not going to book fights now. Don't ask us about who's fighting who next. We're going to get into the war room on Tuesday and start making some of these matches. But for some reason, when John Jones defeated Cyril Gane, UFC 2 minutes later announced, hey, John Jones versus Stipe Miocic is not only going to happen, but it's basically booked and it's going to happen at UFC 290. That's not happening. Another example of this happening this year, it's happened like 3 times. Leon Edwards defeated Kamal Usman. You know, Kobe Covington was in the stands after Leon Edwards defeated Kamal Usman. The UFC in the post-fight press conference, hey, guess what? Kobe Covington versus Leon Edwards is next. That fight's going to happen in July 29th. That's going to be a pay-per-view, a second pay-per-view in London, the UK. That fight's not happening right now. That fight's not happening. So I don't know what's going on with the UFC and like announcing these fights like soon thereafter after their champion wins in a post-fight press conference. Also, Aljamain Sterling versus Henry Cejudo. That was the last pay-per-view. Aljamain Sterling defeated Henry Cejudo. The UFC comes right out and says, guess what? We're going to have Aljamain Sterling versus Sean O'Malley in August, and that fight's going to happen in Boston. And then Aljamain Sterling comes out and says, no, I'm not fighting Sean O'Malley in Boston. No, I'll fight him in September in Las Vegas or something like that. So I don't know what's going on with the UFC. You know, as much as we want to blame Stipe, you know, I think part of it was John Jones being like, hold on, I haven't fought in 3 years, right? I just defeated Cyril Gane. I had to do a lot of training for that match, even though it was in first round. The idea that, you know, I think that fight was in March, right? I believe that fight was in March. Don't quote me. But he's like, okay, now I have to go back and fight Stipe in July. You got March, April, May, June. You got 3 months to prepare for the greatest heavyweight champion of all time. So I think part of it was John Jones saying, well, you know what, this may be my retirement fight. I would prefer to fight in MSG, right? Instead of fighting at International Fight Week. If this is going to be my retirement fight, John Jones, probably want to fight in New York. Not New York City is his hometown, but in New York State is his home state, you know. So I can imagine John Jones wants to fight in November. Stipe Miocic, I don't know what's going on with him. Personally, even though I am an MMA casual, my opinion is that Stipe Miocic doesn't even deserve the title fight. His last fight was 2 years ago. His last fight, he was a champion. He got knocked out by Francis Ngannou, an extremely vicious knockout. And I think that was in the first round. Maybe, I think it may have been in the second round. But it's either the first or second round with Stipe Miocic's last fight 2 years ago, got knocked out cold, hasn't fought since then, hasn't fought any contenders, and now he's walking into another championship fight. Stipe Miocic lost the fight versus Daniel Cormier. Remember, right? Stipe Miocic lost the title fight versus Daniel Cormier, protested for like a year, didn't even fight. Daniel Cormier ended up fighting Derek Lewis, I believe, right? I believe that fight happened, and Stipe Miocic still chose not to fight, and then he came back and got another title fight. So for some unknown reason, Stipe Miocic could lose his last fight, and he would just constantly get his next fight will be a championship fight. I haven't seen Stipe Miocic fight in like a number one contenders fight in a while. I would like to see Stipe, you know, if the John Jones fight doesn't happen because for whatever reason, either Stipe Miocic is probably going to retire or he's going to have to fight someone like Sergey Pavlovich. We just saw Almeida defeat Rosenstrike. So the heavyweight division is starting to pick up some steam. You got Tom Aspinall returning, you know, so we're definitely starting to keep our eyes on the heavyweight division. I would like to see John Jones versus who do I want to see John Jones fight? I don't think Tom Aspinall is there yet. Sergey Pavlovich, you know, I feel like it's still too soon. I would like to see Sergey Pavlov. You know, I kind of want to see like a tournament, right? I kind of wanted to see, you know, maybe Stipe versus Sergey or Sergey versus Tom, and, you know, Gane versus Stipe or Gane versus Aspinall, you know, like a tournament. Because at this moment, I don't feel like there's a real true number one contender. If you just want to do it by elimination, you would say, okay, Sergey Pavlovich is the number one contender. He kind of deserves the championship fight. But I can imagine John Jones being like, listen, if I'm going to retire, you know, the UFC heavyweight division, you know, good for them. There's a few good contenders out there. But even though John Jones just signed a new contract, right? Isn't that the point? Like, I thought he just signed a new contract, but now he's talking about retiring after fighting Stipe. this is all a mess all around. I feel like part of it is the UFC fought, part of it is Stipe fought. I can't really blame John Jones for any part. For me, John Jones takes the least part of it, least blame, because like I said, for some unknown reason, after the fight, in a post-fight press conference, the UFC 2 minutes later comes out and announce John Jones versus Stipe Miocic is booked, UFC 290, it's going to happen. It's like, what? John Jones is like, hold on, what? I haven't fought in 3 years, and now I'm going to fight again in 3 months. And Stipe Miocic, who literally hasn't fought in 2 years, got knocked out in his last fight, and now all of a sudden he's the number one contender. Like, come on, what are we even doing out here? But let me know your opinion of this story. At this point, the question is, who's just going to win the fight? The UFC, also Conor McGregor and Michael Chandler. Like, that fight has been strung along. They announced Conor was back. I believe that was like in January, and we haven't heard one step closer to that fight being booked. We have no idea. Will Conor fight Chandler in a lightweight? Will it be in a welterweight? Will it be a main event? Will it be five? Will it be five rounds? Is it going to be the co-main event? Is Conor even a part of USADA? Where's Chimaev? Where's Hamza Chimaev? There's so many questions with the UFC this year. They've had the first 3 months were popping, right? Great events. John Jones, Leon Edwards, Islam Makhachev, Jamal Hill, Israel Adesanya, Aljamain Sterling. Those are all championship fights the last few months. But the next 2-3 months, it's gonna be, it's gonna be a little bit dry in my opinion. But let me know your opinion of this story. Who do you think wins? John Jones versus Stipe Miocic most likely will be next. Who do you think is gonna win? I personally think John Jones is gonna defeat Stipe Miocic in November in Madison Square Garden. I'm Jason, UFC. Today we have a story about Daniel Cormier provides possible reason for John Jones versus Stipe Miocic fight announcement being delayed. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the $1 donation button, and please tune in to the next video on this channel. Thanks a million for watching.